And here we go. We're going to begin. So welcome. Welcome all of you to Intimate Portraits, Living Well in Recovery, brought to you by NAMI Cook County North Suburban. We're so glad that you chose to spend some of your evening with us tonight. I'm Dr. Christine Somerville. I'm a mental health educator and also the director of programs at NAMI County North Suburban. And for those of you who don't know about NAMI, we are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, providing public awareness, no-cost support and education programs online and in person so that people and families affected by mental health conditions can build better lives. We are a lifeline, really, to individuals and families who don't know what to expect in their difficult life journey. And all of our programs are free and open to those in our 17 community catchment area, but we don't turn anyone away who's in need. We have many people come to our programs who are outside of our service area, and we welcome them. Tonight's presentation is one that I look forward to each time we offer this series, and we've done this now 3 or 4 times. We get such a positive response. So you will not hear a more candid dialogue about mental health than you will hear tonight. And so that's what excites me about our program tonight. What does living well in recovery mean? And how does one move from dark days to thriving with a diagnosis? So our speakers tonight, Alyx and Jess, will share their personal stories of their mental health challenges and how they learned to cope, to adapt, and come to this place where they are now living their best lives. Each one will give you a glimpse into their lives and the amazing journeys that they have had. So I'm just going to say, be prepared to be inspired. We'll have plenty of time at the end for a Q&A. I'm going to just suggest, if you want to, you can type questions in the chat box anytime during the presentation, but we'll wait until after Jess and Alyx have spoken before we start addressing the questions. I usually introduce our speakers, but tonight they will introduce themselves to you. And I'm going to step back out of their way, and I will return for our Q&A. So with that said, take it away, Jess.
Hello, good to be speaking for another wonderful NAMI event. This is it's just such a pleasure to be able to be in front of this camera here. But so hi everyone, I'm Jess, and a little bit about myself. I'm 23 years old. I am a recent graduate of DePaul University. I have 3 older brothers. And 1 little brother who's a cat, and he's a good friend of mine. And finally, I have a little brother. 2 amazing parents. Like I said, I graduated recently from DePaul University. I love school. I'm very passionate about it. I love basketball. One of my heroes is LeBron James. I love hip hop. I love very lyrical and inspiring, music. So to start my journey of where, what allowed me to be where I am today, started when I was an adolescent in high school. Growing up, well, even before that, when I was growing up, at a very early age, I was diagnosed with a myriad of, disorders growing up. And the first one was Tourette syndrome when I was in 2nd grade. And then as I got older, I started developing anxiety and, OCD and then depression. And so at a very young age, I was, faced first with a lot of issues that my classmates weren't really going through. So as I got older, I started to really, lean on, my family, and started getting really closer with my brothers. And when I was in high school, my freshman year, my brother Luke was a senior, and he was in peer group, and he was a peer group leader. So he, star volleyball player. They went down to state to play volleyball, state championship, and he was very straight edge, and he instilled into me a lot of morals and things that he learned as a peer group mentor. And I very much took those morals to heart. And he eventually went to college, and I got older, and my friends around me started to, indulge in things and substances and such that my brother instilled into me not to do. And I was very, very against doing those things. And eventually I started to distance myself from my friends, and, my depression and things, not separated myself, but it kicked in when I was separated from my friends more and more. And it was, very powerful, and it was lonely. So my brother, my whole family at this time didn't really go through any mental health troubles. None of my brothers were experiencing, things that eventually I started to go through. So at that time, my brother and two of my brothers decided, might as well indulge in those substances and, gain my friends back. And they thought it wouldn't be any of harm. And that's when I started the first day I, indulged in marijuana. The predisposition of what my mental illness is, which is schizoaffective. What happened was the second hit happened. I was born with it, and it was in my brain throughout my life. And you can say it manifested in my Tourette's, in my OCD, and I had, lingering, experiences as I was growing up. But the second hit, what really started to, create the psychosis, is when I started to, indulge and smoke marijuana. And the first time I ever did that was a very, off the bat, you can tell that I had some sort of dependency to it. As the first time I ever smoked, I smoked enough to probably knock out Snoop Dogg or Willie Nelson. And, off the bat, it immediately was something that I latched onto. It allowed me to experience things separate from my pain that I, was growing up with. And it was something very new. I saw the world differently. I connected with people, in a more intimate way is what I thought. And my friends also started to accept me as I started doing the things that, they wanted me to do, because I was a buzzkill at that point. So a lot of things immediately started to kick off almost as fast as the second hit started to come into my mind. And as these things started intertwining, things just started to build off of each other. And my psychosis, my actual diagnosis, my schizoaffective, started to form pretty heavily as I got heavily into, experiences, and pushing the limit is what I tried to do with my mind with, marijuana. And eventually I, started to experience even doing that different than my friends. And, they in the very beginning when I was using, they were very happy that I was able to do that. Finally Jess is, coming to parties and doing stuff like that. But when I was at parties, I would be in the back trying to convince people about, ideas of stuff, and wasn't really social with them. And I was just in my own world. And the more I did that, the more I indulged in the thinking and the smoking and combining them, the more my psychosis developed, and the more I started to, show that, I wasn't really fit to be smoking that. And I thought at that point it was like a medicine for me. It was something that was allowing me to do these things that I thought were more impressive to do while under the influence. So stuff that I, like rapping and playing basketball, I thought that I was better, when I was under the influence. And when I would record myself doing things, you would definitely see that I was worse at that. It was a delusion that, started to kick in a lot. And that's when the psychosis really started to show in my parents, and the people around me were noticing that it was getting pretty bad. And the day I slipped into deep psychosis was the day I first went into the psych ward. The day I first went into the psych ward, I immediately, after smoking a lot, slipped into this state of reality where I thought that the world and everything around me, knew who I was. I was some sort of chosen one, some sort of prophet that eventually started to get worse into more, grandiose perceptions. And when that started, I was full flight from reality, running around my house, trying to convince, the people who are watching me, which weren't anybody, to, follow the beliefs that I had about smoking and stuff like that. So I ended up in the psych ward, and that's when I was in placed to get sober. And I never really wanted to. I never really wanted to indulge in the sobriety. I thought that I was too. I didn't know this, but my psychosis was so powerful at that point because I wasn't used to it. I wasn't indulged into it, or it was new, very new and very powerful. That I thought that the things around me were real, and they weren't. At that point, I thought that my life was very much like the Truman Show, where the world basically was watching me in this, habitat that I didn't realize, but I thought that I was smart enough to realize. So I would try to convince the people around me that I knew that this reality was the true, experience, that I knew that the Truman Show reality that I thought I was living in, I tried to convince people that I knew, right? And they thought they had no idea what I was experiencing. And it got very frustrating for me. And my parents and I had a lot of, arguments, and, and they were just trying to understand me. And I couldn't at that point be understood because of this barrier, this almost contradiction, this contradictory thought process that I had. I expected them to know something that they had no idea was real. And the fact that they didn't understand it made me very angry. So a lot of times I would, had arguments with my parents, and, I thought that they were against me in some sort of way. So I would run away from home a lot. I always came back because, something that I learned with people with schizoaffective schizophrenia is that, they really can lock on to the goodness of someone, and it attracts them to them. It always makes them, feel comfortable, or, there's an aura around them that they can, sense and come back to. So I don't know, my parents are incredibly loving and giving. So I always came back, even though the delusions were heavy, I always came back. So eventually I started to just hide my smoking. After psych ward trips, multiple times, I believed that I was some sort of prophet, some sort of messiah, and it got worse and worse. I was smoking a lot, and I was believing in these perceptions. And eventually, I hit a point where the psychosis that I was experiencing wasn't relieved when I was using. So I hit some sort of bottom, and usually when people hit bottoms, it's dangerous or, very severe, but it was just me sitting in my room realizing that I really, really don't like living this way. I don't like experiencing the emotions that I've experienced. I was jumping out of, cars while my mom was driving, and being in the middle of the intersection and flipping her off and stuff like that. And it wasn't because I had anything against them. It was because I was living in a reality that I thought what I was doing was, a way to get out of it. And there was nothing that was getting me out of it at that point. And the thing that I was so wanting to do, which was smoking, wasn't helping either. So I realized that I needed help in some sort of way. So my parents and my therapist at that point developed or found a treatment center for me to go to, and I willingly went there. And it was right before my parents were gonna try to, I don't want to say forcefully, but convinced me to go there, and I willingly said yes. And I went there, and I was hoping that I was going to be there. It was this place, beautiful place in Idaho, and I was hoping to be there for 3 months, and that my intention was to be there for 3 months and sober up and then come back so I can enjoy my using even, like I used to. But honestly, thank God that I stayed there as long as I did. I stayed there for 14 months, and it was a very rigorous program. Don't get me wrong. Idaho is a very, very beautiful place. The treatment center that I was in was a very, very tough place. I call it like boot camp for, mental health. And it was very true, daily routines, right? That was instilled into me that I had to, show myself success in doing in order for me to move forward in the program. And most of the kids, they just wanted to move forward in the program so that they can get, a solid routine and get home. And that's all I wanted, was to just get home. But I realized that I wasn't going to get home, and I wasn't going to get healthy as long as I, stayed in my old ways. And eventually, after I think it was 8 or 10 months in the program, after slowly cutting out my delusions by having, the program, that the routine slowly but surely over time started allowing myself to, come out of my delusions and be aware of what's real and what was not. I remember having phone calls with my parents and telling them, I know I'm not a prophet. I know I'm not a prophet. I know I'm just a regular kid, and developing strategies with my therapist, just telling myself, when my psychosis gets high in these levels, just tell myself, I'm Jess. I'm just at that point I was 18 or 19. I'm just a 18-year-old kid, and I have 3 brothers and stuff to root me down, and it helped. So I developed these things, and I was getting a lot better. And at that point, I was committed to being sober, and I had my first taste of recovery, and it was amazing, and it moved me faster in the program. And it eventually, I got out. I would say like a honorable discharge, because a lot of people from that program, they don't really make it, to the whole way through. And it took me 14 months, and I got home, and I was committed to being sober. And I started to go to DePaul University, and I was a freshman studying psychology, and I was very into my recovery at that point. And I realized that I really needed to put forth effort into my recovery, and into a routine, and into a system or a program of life. Because my psychosis, I realized the power of, and I also realized that the more I gain, my mental health back, the more I, grew it, gained it back, and added on to it, the more my psychosis developed and evolved, and it cut its way into my mind and into my living. And it always appeared and always had a new level of strength to it. And I remember, when I realized that I really, really needed to work on my recovery, not just my sobriety, but my emotional sobriety, when I started to experience the worst pains of my life. And I remember I read somewhere in some science article that the top 10 most painful experiences that a human being can experience. And they went from and all sorts of experiences. And they said number 1 was the almost infinite capacity of mental psychological torment that mental illness or experiences can give. And I totally believe that. I had experiences of that. I just remember, having just such tormented, painful and profound, experiences, laying in my mom's arms, just screaming, to get me out of that pain. And at that point, I knew that my psychosis was going to stick with me. It was going to be there, and it was always going to evolve, and always, be the hardest thing facing in my life. And that's when I really, really, really started working to my routine. I developed huge relationships with mentors. I got a big sponsor for sobriety, and I worked the 12 steps diligently with him. I followed him everywhere he went. He called me his shadow. I started working deeply with my therapist. Every week we talked, and throughout the week we would, talk about the stuff that we talked about, on our sessions. And I was learning new things, new strategies, new, theories about psychology and mental health and sobriety. And every week I was learning, I was reading, I was developing a program. I started to get really into physical fitness, started playing a lot of basketball, started trying to get really, in shape and in the best physique I can. With my psychiatrist, I developed a big program of medicine, of medication, and what I mean by that is I was willing to let him and I work together for the benefit of my brain. And we, for years and years, we're tweaking, a system of medication. And when things showed promise, then we would stick with that. And if things, it was all about, give and take, and working with my mentors, which were my therapist, my sponsor, my psychiatrist. And at that point, I developed a big routine that I stuck with. And the thing that allowed me to keep myself, growing through my psychosis, no matter how powerful it was, is sticking to my program. And not just sticking to it and rigorously working it, but believing in it and then working harder on it more and more, trying to add on to it, trying to do better as I can, trying to be at least 1% better than I was the day before. And I did that for years. And even though it was years, eventually I showed promise. And what happened was I eventually started to get really, into service. I was able to start being a speaker for NAMI, which was one of the most amazing gifts that I've ever been a part of. My parents were deeply integrated into NAMI in the family to family, and my brothers were learning in the family to family as well. And they, we were all gaining understandings about the world of mental illness and the experience of it. And as I got sober and more connected and more recovered, they would learn as well. And from that, we would have a better relationship, and we would understand each other, know what's, how to approach each other, how to communicate. And definitely, things weren't perfect, but we were willing to grow. And, like I say, the experience of mental illness can affect so many people around in a positive way. If recovery is something that is happening, and it can always happen. I know it could always happen for anybody. So now today, I am almost 5 years sober from all substances. In August, I'll be 5 years sober from all substances. I graduated from DePaul University in the School of Science and Health or Psychology. Graduated a couple months ago, and I'm going back to DePaul in the fall for grad school and getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I am a NAMI presenter for Inner Own Voice, and I am in a very, 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 very amazing spot in my life, but that doesn't mean that my psychosis is not there. It is very much there, stronger than it was ever before. But I have a system. I have a beautiful system of NAMI to come in and connect with people and serve. And, I have a great relationship with my family. I have great mentors to help me out. And, I'm just trying to grow day by day, and I'm grateful. This whole experience, that I've been in has allowed me to be where I am today. And I know I'm going to be even in a better place or in a more growth as I go on. And I'm just very grateful for where I've come. And I don't need to be anxious about where I need to go, because I can look back and see how far I've come. So, and I'm very grateful. So that it will be about it for me for now. And I'll turn it over to Alyx.
So, Alyx, before you start, I'm thinking that maybe I can toss some questions that have come up to Jess.
Sure.
One was, did your parents know about NAMI at the time that you first started having symptoms? or, well, how long, I guess the answer, you kind of talked about this. So how long did it take your family to sort of find NAMI and start working with NAMI to understand your illness?
I believe, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so when I was in treatment, the very beginning, so it took maybe, I would say less than 6 months, maybe before, because when I started to go and need treatment, that's when things started to really, occur where, it said, Jess really needed some help. And around that time, my mom and dad and my brothers, they found NAMI. They went on the NAMI walks, the march or the walking, every October or whatever, and took family to family classes, started learning about strategies. And when I was in treatment, working with my therapy team who was helping me and using their, wisdom that they learned from NAMI, definitely was one of the main reasons that allowed me to realize that I needed to be sober at that point. And that was one of the greatest things that's happened to me.
So also the program that you went to in Idaho, was that a program mostly for addiction, or was it for mental health, or both?
It was definitely for both. It was mostly for mental health, actually, but it definitely instilled a lot of program and routine and practices to people to be sober, because I knew that being sober would be healthy for most people in those situations, with mental health. It's not something, that I say everybody should, but I know for me, people like me, being sober definitely is just something that, is one less thing to worry about, so. And it was for young adults and adolescents. They have multiple parts of the program: the adolescent, then the young adult, and then higher parts of the program. So yeah.
So someone else has asked. I was surprised when you said that your psychosis is still very much alive. How does it manifest itself today, and how do you control it?
What I realized, one of the best ways to control it is to not feed into it. If anybody's ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, where the main character, hallucinates a few people that always follow him and stuff, and he realized that he couldn't tell them to go away, he couldn't make them do anything, he can just focus on his path and ignore them, basically. And I'm not saying I'm ignoring my psychosis by letting it do what it wants, but I'm not feeding into it. And how it manifests today is it evolves into I guess pieces of my life that are very, very deep within my subconscious. So it creates paranoia or thoughts that are always seeping into my, the same thoughts, the same perceptions that are always attacking me and always constantly trying to get into my mind. And when I feed into it, when I think my way out of it, that's when it has me, because I feed into it. And when I give it those thoughts, I give it fuel. And when I give it fuel, then I am almost powerless. So how I gain power over it is I focus. I try to live as recovered and healthy and sober as I possibly can every day. And, just trying to gain more strategy and more power, by, recovery and mental health. And, and that's what definitely helps.
And then the flip side of it, do you experience moments or times when you feel no psychosis or no illness?
It's always there. I know, and especially the perception of like how I see life. The film of how I see life definitely is. I'm becoming more aware of what is psychosis compared to what most other people experience. So I'm able now to be aware of the fact that, okay, this is psychosis. How I'm experiencing life is not, what other people are experiencing. So I'm always experiencing that, but becoming aware of it allows me to, step back and be healthy and sober-minded and and aware. So I have a lot of, perceptions of reality that are very, very, very deep and very distorted and not, stuff like that. But it, I know what to focus on. I know what to focus on. So, and that's what allows me to kind of just know that that's psychosis, and I know where to go. So, yeah.
Okay, and then the last question. Well, the question is, do you take medication? But you already said that you did. So,
Yeah.
Are you on a routine that's working for you right now?
Yeah, and I'm still giving adjustments to the medication, and the one of the best pieces of advice that I've learned is trusting in my medication and trusting in my relationship with my psychiatrist. I used to actually years ago not want to be on medication because I thought it was hindering me from things, but now I'm calling him, asking him if we can adjust, we can add here, we can take a vitamin instead of, or stuff like that, and it's got to the point now where it now has allowed me to break through another stage of psychosis, and I'm in a very healthy spot again. So, yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Stay with us. We're gonna move to Alyx now.
Okay.
All right.
So, hi everyone. As Christina's mentioned, my name's Alyx. As you can tell from my little square on our Zoom, it's spelled Alyx. So I was named for a character in a little-known science fiction series from the 1970s, and that's why my first name is spelled the way it is. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. Both of my brothers are younger. True story, Midwest Living Magazine stole my brownie recipe. I'm currently co-facilitating 3 or 4 NAMI Connection peer support groups weekly for those of us who are living with mental health conditions. And I also do inner own voice presentations, and I help raise money as a development assistant in the office. So you can say that NAMI keeps me very, very busy. I attended Loyola University for both my undergraduate and graduate degrees. I have a master's in clinical psychology, and while I was in graduate school, I taught classes in child development, cognitive behavioral therapy, and assessment, and I loved teaching and sharing the joy of psychology with my students. I also have 2 cats. I love to bake, read, embroider, and hike, and try new restaurants, and I do also love to eat. And my middle brother, who lives in St. Louis, is my best friend and biggest supporter. So I'd like to provide you with some context for a crisis that I'm going to describe to you in a few moments. And I'd like to start off by saying that I come from a family with a long history of mental health conditions. All of my family, especially on my dad's side, but somewhat on my mom's as well, has a constellation of mostly mood and anxiety problems, along with possibly some substance use issues. It's kind of hard to tell because we didn't talk about it. These problems affected multiple generations of my family, and I am positive that you would find similar problems if you just traced my dad's family tree backwards multiple generations. And it's something that my family knew about, but like I said, we didn't talk about it due to lack of understanding and then the stigma of mental illness. It was all really hush-hush. Mental illnesses were euphemized as his or her ... condition. And any sort of mental illness was referred to as simply just having nerves, which covers a lot of territory. So I came into this world with both nature and nurture leaving me vulnerable to developing a mental health condition. That being said, I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that I started showing symptoms of a mental health condition at a very young age. I can remember being depressed for the first time when I was 7. So my mood dropped, I became anxious and irritable and sad, I had severe insomnia, and I had already started thinking about suicide. So yes, I was already thinking about that at this very young age. Um, my change in mood was even noted on the report cards that I brought home in second grade, and it was obvious to the adults around me that I was suffering, but nobody knew what to do to help me or how to get me into treatment. And truthfully, no one really thought about taking a kid for mental health treatment back in the 1980s in the Midwest. Mental health services for kids and teenagers didn't really exist back then in that area of the country. So people with enough money and the relevant cultural knowledge might have had the understanding and access to get a child psychiatrist, but it was far from the norm, and it was far from accessible for most families, and particularly for lower income families like mine. My family had some access to counseling services through a church, which was very comforting, but it wasn't really sufficient to address what was going on with me. So I suffered through regular, intense, and predictable bouts of depression and anxiety over the course of my childhood and adolescence. And I also developed an eating disorder during this time of my life, which was probably exacerbated by my participation in gymnastics. I was able to manage my mood, my anxiety, and my eating disorder problems without medication or therapy during high school, largely because my life during that time was extremely structured. I had set hours when I went to school, engaged with my extracurricular activities, when I studied, when I had meals, saw friends, and so on and so forth. I didn't have a lot of downtime. Little time in my life was unscheduled. My parents were very strict, as you should know. My dad is a Marine, and they are noted for being strict parents. And so skipping school or skipping out on activities was never an option for me. Once I left school to attend college, though, my ability to cope with my mental health problems deteriorated rapidly. There was nobody around me to make me get out of bed on time or attend class, see other people, eat regularly. And once the structure in my life was removed, I just could not fight against my mental illnesses any longer. I had what I now recognize as my first episode of mania during my first semester of college when I was 18. I quit sleeping. I stayed up all night to read and research topics that were unfortunately not relevant for my classes. I started talking rapidly and a lot, and I felt an active, really revved up and impulsive. My concentration deteriorated, and my class attendance was erratic at best. As a result, my grades dropped, and I didn't perform academically at the high level that I and others expected from myself. Eventually, I failed out of college due to my mood disorder, which left me with a GPA of 1.7 that I then had to fix before I continue with my studies. And kind of funny fact, I even failed Psychology 101, which was truly entertaining to explain to my advisor when I was applying for graduate school. So after I failed out of college, I did eventually connect with a therapist and a psychiatrist for my mood and anxiety problems. But I was initially misdiagnosed and didn't receive a correct diagnosis of bipolar disorder until I was 38. And it took me 15 years to get a correct diagnosis. But getting a correct diagnosis finally put me on a path towards getting appropriate treatment, which involves, for me, both medication and psychotherapy. So with all of that backstory in mind, I would like to share with you the worst crisis of my life. It started in March 2014, and it ended at last in October 2014. I had a manic phase that started in March, and it peaked in mid-June. So some people experience mania as feeling wonderful and happy and in love with the world. That's not what I experienced with mania. I felt like I was flying high and fast, but I felt more in hate with the world and everyone in it, and it started to show in my behavior. My self-esteem was out of control. I thought that I was smarter, funnier, prettier, and just better than everyone around me. I felt like the ruler of everything and everyone around me, and I felt on top of the world, but I felt just anger and contempt for other people. To me, everyone else seemed stupid and slow and in my way, and I just did not have any patience for anyone. I was outside running around, angry all the time. I was cussing out strangers on the street out of my car window. I was trying to pick fights with strangers. I was driving aggressively, and I drank too much because being drunk felt good and it calmed me down. I also spent thousands of dollars on clothes, shoes, and makeup, as I kind of thought, why buy one cardigan when you can buy 12? So thoughts just poured into my head like I had a fire hose attached to my brain. And then they just raced around at about 1,000 miles an hour. I could not catch them to save my life. This obviously made it very hard to concentrate. I had all of these ideas just pouring in and swirling around, and I couldn't latch on to any ideas, much less concentrate at work. I felt wired so much that sleep felt completely unnecessary. I was waking up at 3 in the morning just to pace. I got paranoid that the police were after me, and I was sure that the police were going to frame me for murders that other people had committed. So I panicked every time I heard a police siren, and I tried to get out of sight whenever I saw a police officer or a police car. And later, after this episode had passed, I had friends and family telling me that I was speaking too fast and with too much pressure. I hadn't noticed that that was happening. And at the time, none of this seemed strange to me or off key at all, and I did not even think to call my psychiatrist about it. The depression crash came hard the last week of July. In the month prior, I plummeted to earth suddenly. I'd mostly stopped eating because the effort involved in eating was just too much work and everything tasted like cardboard anyway. I lost about 25 pounds. I had mostly stopped sleeping, getting 2 or 3 hours a night and waking up well before dawn. I started crying most of the day, and I kept hiding in my car at work to cry in private. I felt like the worst person in the world, and I felt like I was the biggest failure in the world. I felt like my family and friends would be lucky to be rid of me, and so I started planning my suicide. I've sometimes said before, the inside of my head was a bad neighborhood, and at this point in my life, it really was. So I forced myself to get out of bed for work, but I was not really functioning at home or at work. Mostly, I panicked and I cried. One day at work, I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. I started sobbing, I couldn't stop, and I felt like I was having a heart attack. This and a viable plan for suicide brought me to an inpatient hospital stay. I was the most depressed I had ever been, and I was also the most scared I had ever been. Although the worst of the depression lifted in the month after I left the hospital, it took until the end of October, after spending 2 months in an intensive outpatient treatment program, for me to feel like I was truly in the clear from the depression. So, one of the things that we talk about in these presentations is treatment. And the treatment plan that I followed after this episode enabled me to come to a place of recovery today. And this plan consisted of the hospitalization, the participation in the intensive outpatient program, and medication. I spent 5 days inpatient managing the depression crash I experienced. These days were not enjoyable days. I was depressed and bored, although a bunch of us did have some fun making the third-year medical student color with us. But the hospitalization allowed me to emerge from this crisis alive, with my will to live restored. I also resolved that I would work hard to stay out of the hospital. Once was enough. When I was discharged from the hospital, I immediately began an intensive outpatient program. I spent the next 2 months learning coping skills to help me manage my mental health condition, and I use these coping skills to this day. I can't possibly list everything I learned in the time we have available, so I'll describe 2 of the coping skills that I personally found most helpful. And these are dial up for depression, dial down for mania. So for depression, you do activities that activate or dial up your body and mind. So you get out of bed on schedule, you do household chores that require some exertion, such as scrubbing the bathroom, you go running or take a brisk walk, play energetic music, and you make sure that you see family and friends. But for mania, you do activities that quiet or dial down your body and mind. So you do yoga, you stretch, you take a quiet walk, play soothing or down-tempo music, spend some quiet time with a pet, and meditate. And these 2 skills have helped me navigate several major mood episodes without having to go to the hospital. And truthfully, I believe that participating in the hospital and then the outpatient program afterwards saved my life. And if the hospitalization and outpatient program saved my life, then appropriate medication has kept me going. I worked with my very lovely collaborative psychiatrist to overhaul my medications into a regimen that maximized effectiveness and minimized side effects. To be truthful, I still don't love the medication and I don't love the side effects, but getting the right medications made my brain feel like it had been finally given the stuff it needed to work properly. In addition to treatment, I think that acceptance has been a major help for me in managing my mental health condition. To me, acceptance means that you understand that you have a mental illness, that you're going to have to treat it if you want to get better, that it might not ever go away, and that it's going to bring both some difficulties and maybe also some unexpected blessings into your life. It means that you have to accept that maybe you've said or done things that can't be undone, and you have to forgive yourself for that. For example, I will never get a good recommendation for my last job because I trashed my workspace, I made too many mistakes, and I showed up for work non-functional. It all happened because of an illness that wasn't under my control, but I still have to take responsibility for it, and I have to forgive myself for it. I can't undo it, and that's acceptance. I also met 3 of my most wonderful friends in the world because I had to do the intensive outpatient program. They get me like nobody else, and they love me, and they tell me when my mood is taking a turn for the worse and I'm not noticing it. And that's also acceptance. For me, acceptance is a daily decision. I have more acceptance of my mental illness now than I did in 2014. But there are days that I backslide and I don't want to accept my illness. So acceptance is definitely not a destination for me. It's a process that I have to actively choose. So what does the future hold for me? I see ongoing recovery, sustained coping, and successes small and hopefully large in my future. For me, recovery is an ongoing process, and that's the foundation from which I work. Everything that I do to manage my illness and orient myself towards the future is based on this. I know that some days I'll be ahead and some days I'm going to slip. It's about picking myself up when I slip and making progress, not about being perfect. I am so fortunate to have a strong support network to keep me on the road to recovery, and I tap into this network to cope. My family and friends are all educated about my mental illness. They know signs that I might be relapsing. They know how to handle a relapse. And most importantly, they love me and they treat me like a person first. I'm Alyx who likes to hike, not mentally ill Alyx who likes to hike. And the difference there is major. I also get out to now virtually see friends as a way of coping. It doesn't really matter what we do. It just matters that I see them. In the before times, getting pie was always welcome. I take walks alone to clear my head when it's safe for me to be alone. And before COVID happened, I saw my 3 friends from my intensive outpatient program every week for coffee and for pie. It was like a little 4-person support group with pie, and it was pretty awesome, all things considered. I meet once a week with a therapist who specializes in bipolar disorder, and together we keep me functioning and keep my recovery on point. In case it wasn't apparent, I do cope using humor. So far, I haven't encountered anything so bad that I can't laugh at it, although my sense of humor does have a well-developed sick streak. I do gratitude meditations every day to remind me to be thankful for the many good things in my life. And I talk to my brother Jason as often as I can. He's my best friend, and he helps me stay grounded. He's always been one of my biggest supporters, and I'm so incredibly thankful for him. I maintain a very strict sleep schedule. I go to bed and get up at the same time every day, weekends included. And honestly, this is one of the aspects of my mental illness that I don't like and I have trouble maintaining. I would like to stay up late and get up whenever I want, but it's really bad for my mental health if I do this. And I have to make it a daily commitment for my well-being. I have also learned that I cannot skip meals. And unfortunately, cookies don't count as a meal as much as I might like to argue otherwise. And also, I do have to say that NAMI has played a huge part in my recovery. In addition to facilitating connection support groups, I also attend one of my own every week. And truly, I get as much as I give from working with NAMI. The support and the love that group members show to each other is beyond heartwarming. In NAMI Connection, I found a fellowship of people who are just like me, who had similar histories, similar struggles, and the same successes that I did. NAMI Connection has given me hope that I could live a positive and healthy life despite having mental illnesses, and it also gives me tools to create this positive and healthy life. So through support and fellowship, we find strength in sharing experiences, we forgive ourselves, we fight stigma, we aim for better coping skills, we reject shame and guilt, and we expect a better future in a realistic way. And the most important thing is that we never give up hope. In terms of successes, I celebrate them wherever I can find them. They don't have to be big to be meaningful. I count it as a success when I stay out of the hospital, when I maintain my sleep schedule, say no to alcohol, get dinner on the table, run my connection support groups, and manage my mood swings. And I always feel like it's a big success when I can educate other people about mental illness, and it's an even bigger success for me to come in here and to talk to you all today. And with that, I will close up my remarks and turn things back over to Christine.
All right, both of you, thank you. Such inspiring stories. I want to see that we have some questions now that we want to cover. So I think some of these are not directed to either one of you, but I will read them, and you can each take them for what they are, maybe for you or for the other. So one person has, it was Dan, said, oh, this is to everyone. Congratulations on your graduation and degree accomplishments. And I guess that's for both of you, actually. Let's see. Oh, here's a question again from Dan. I think this was for you, Alyx.
Okay.
Do you have any family histories, other kinds of trauma? You said that your family had a lot of mental illness.
Not that I know of. It could be there, but we don't talk about mental illness, so we don't really talk about trauma either. It wouldn't shock me if it were there, but I don't know of any.
Okay. Another question is, have you seen a change in how people, and this is for both of you, to answer. So I'm only seeing, I'm gonna do a gallery view here so I can see both of you. Okay, there you are. Hi, Jess. Have you seen a change in other people's acceptance and understanding of your illness over time? Do you think things have changed over time for you? And, you know, maybe in general, in society, do you see any changes?
So I can easily take this one, and I'll let Jess chime in as he feels as he wants. I definitely feel like there's been a change in how people accept and understand mental illness. I've seen it in my own family in the 8 years since I've been diagnosed. They're a lot more educated. They're a lot more open-minded about things like medication and therapy. They're not as scared as they were. You know, people look at bipolar disorder and they're like, "Oh no, this is a scary diagnosis." Well, it's not necessarily a scary diagnosis. I live very well, and I can also tell because I'm a little bit older than Jess, but 20 years or so. And what's accessible to people, especially young people, since I was a kid, has just bloomed. You know, people have child psychiatrists, child therapists, practices that specialize in treating children. Obviously there's, concerns about insurance and access and payment and all that. But the type of help that I would have liked to have gotten when I was a kid is there now. It wasn't then, it is now. And I think it's just huge. It's just huge. And it speaks to how much change we've come through as a society.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Jess?
No, I think, she put it perfect. In my experience, I just know with the people around me, my family members, definitely this whole journey has been a team effort, and there's no I in team, and definitely I've seen that as time has gone by and the more I've recovered, the more my family grow as not only just as understanding of mental illness and the realities of it, but also as caring people, and their hearts have grown, and their susceptibility to love and to understand and to care for other people. I mean, it was always huge with my family, but this whole journey has just brought such light into it. And there were definitely hard times. There were definitely hard times, and there will be hard times. But the growth that we've obtained from it is, in my mind, I think is priceless. So.
Thank you for that. I think so. Here's a question that I think was directed to Alyx, and it was, "What do you mean by when it's safe for me to be alone?"
So sometimes the thoughts that I have in my head get pretty dark, and I would like to say that I'm always safe and would never do anything to harm myself, but I would be lying to you if I said that. And during those times, it's probably best that I don't go on a walk by the lakeshore by myself. So those are times when I let people know how I'm feeling, and I'm very upfront about it. And I get the social support and connection that I need.
Okay, wonderful. I want to go back, and this is to both of you too. I want to go back to your discussion about getting your diagnosis, because this is something that I think is important for people to. I'm sorry about my little kitty. I think this is important. I think this is important for people to understand, and that is, for each one of you, was getting a diagnosis. How did that feel? Was that a positive thing because you maybe finally understood what was going on, or was it a dreadful thing because now you you have a label that follows you around now for the rest of your life. Or
Jess, you want to go first, Jess?
Sure. I know for myself because of the psychosis and how in the very dark days I was very I was delusional. So when I was first diagnosed, when I was in the psych ward for the first time, when I was first diagnosed, when I had a doctor say that I was schizoaffective, I didn't believe it, or I thought that I was above it in some way, that was just some label that they put to it describe something that they couldn't really understand about me. And that was my mindset. And I realized, looking back, that when I accepted it, when I realized, okay, this blockage, or this brick wall that I hit after, believing the delusions for so long, I realized that breaking through it, I had to accept that, okay, I may not understand completely, I may not have everything figured out. And when I accepted that, okay, this is something that is a condition within myself, that it is some sort of faulty wiring in some way, that I really, am being, I guess, deterred with in some way. When I accepted that and I realized, okay, this is a condition that I have, that's when I was able to move forward and step out of my delusions. And the more I'm out of my delusion, the more I'm aware of what is psychosis and what is not. And that allows me to recover and make the right moves towards that. So definitely in the beginning, I didn't want to believe it. I thought that it was an insult to be called me that, but now, I know that accepting it and honoring it and, just owning up to it is something that I really needed to do. And I'm glad that I'm doing it.
yeah, it's helping you. It's helped you.
Yeah.
What about you, Jess?
I have to say that it was a huge relief. I wasn't so concerned about the stigma because I'd been initially just misdiagnosed with something yet more stigmatizing. So it was kind of nice to feel like, okay, this thing that I thought was the problem isn't the problem. And getting the diagnosis made a whole bunch of things just suddenly make sense, which was great. I'm like, oh, okay, there is a word for what I'm feeling. There are treatment options for it. The reason I've been floundering for so long is because I didn't have the correct diagnosis. So getting the bipolar diagnosis was, I hate to say that it was fantastic, but it made so many things just make more sense. And I ended up being very grateful for it in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Kathy says, I cannot express how wonderful it was to get a correct diagnosis. I had so many diagnoses that were convenient to service providers that sent me down unhelpful roads and taking medications that harmed me. Thank you, Kathy, for liking my kitty. So let's see. Dan says, thanks to both of you for your honest sharing. I'm finding it very helpful. And Nathaniel says, excellent presentations. All of us at NAMI are so proud of you. Keep it up. So unless we have any other questions, I think we've covered all of the questions. Yep, all the questions. So again, I want to thank both of you for sharing your stories, for being so candid, so honest, and so inspiring. It's been a wonderful time to spend with you. I'm sure that our listeners have been inspired too. So I want to, before we close, I'd like to just say these are especially difficult times. And the pandemic has left an indelible imprint on our lives. It's something we will learn to live with long after COVID is behind us. So I'm going to post the National Suicide Prevention number in the chat box. so that you can copy it in your phones or on a notepad. And because you never know when you might need it. So let me put it in the chat right now before we go.
I think in the chat somebody said that there was a question that may not have been answered.
Oh, where is that question? So Stanley asked about strategies that Jess uses.
Yeah, definitely. It took me a long time to develop my routine, my day-to-day routine, and my day-to-day routine is consists of just a bunch of tools that I've learned has very significant, weight and value to not only what helps me, but also allows me to move forward. And a lot of those things are, asking for help. So going to, support meetings. I go to a lot of sobriety meetings. I go to seeing my therapist and talking to my psychiatrist, talking to my sponsor for, sobriety, taking my medication. I read a lot of spiritual or, help, I guess, textbooks and stuff, not textbooks, but scriptures and, things that help. And I meditate a lot. I try to find the best way that I can meditate, that helps me, because meditation can be very special to anybody and unique to anybody. I pray a lot. I try to have a connection with a higher power. I physically exercise as much as I can. I try to play a lot of basketball. I try to jump around and try to dunk as much as I can. I make music. I write, poetry and lyrics, and I do projects for myself. I write. Recently, me and my therapist have been working on creating a book. So I write a little bit of it, and as much as I can a day. And yeah, pretty much that. Being of service also gets me out of my own head, which is sometimes good. Like I like what Alyx says, that sometimes my mind can be a bad neighborhood, and sometimes it is, right? Mm-hmm. Even nowadays, and getting myself out of that, and helping other people is also something that is immensely, wonderful to do, and it's just a great, fulfilling thing to be a part of. So that's about it, for now, at least.
That's a lot. That's a lot of good strategies. Both of you have such a good way with words.
Thank you.
I think you should both write books.
Oh dear.
Suggestion.
Yeah.
So before we close, I want to just remind our listeners that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're planning some more interesting speakers for you. Our next program is on May 19. The topic is resilience, supporting youth through COVID and beyond. And Mental Health America, Fusion Academy, Yellow Brick Clinic, and NAMI CCNS are all joining together to bring you this program. We'll have a panel of speakers, including a researcher, an educator, a parent, and a psychologist, and 3 students. I'll be moderating this lively discussion, which I think you won't want to miss. So tonight's program was part of NAMI's In Our Own Voice series. If you enjoyed it, and I know you did, you can find more information about our upcoming programs and events on our website at www.namiccns.org. And I'd also like to invite you to join us on May 20 for our virtual gala, Lighting the Way. It will be full of fun and some great prizes and food. Yes, that's true. You can order food to enjoy along with the program. And you can register for the event on our website. We are glad that you could spend part of your night with us and look forward to seeing you again. But until then, stay safe, take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you and good night.
Bye, everyone. It's nice to spend time with you.